Hi, my name is Keith, and today I'm going to do a Bible study video. And the subject of today's video is God gives grace to the humble. Now, I only have a few verses in today's um, video, so I'm going to start off with James chapter 4 and verse 6. But he giveth more grace, wherefore he saith, God resisteth the proud, but give grace unto the humble. So, um, God helps those who are humble. And like if you're proud and haughty, like you're not going to get any help from him. So, I mean, that's pretty simple, man. You gotta lower yourself, and there's ways of doing that. And most people don't understand, because they never hear it and they don't really read the word enough to know how to do it. And it's actually fairly simple. There's certain things that you can do, and I'm going to get into that a little more in this video. So next, I'm going to read 1 Peter chapter 5, and that's also going to be verse 6. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time. So I said, God is going to help the humble. So if you're proud and haughty, not so much. He's not going to help you, if you do stuff like that. Exhibit pride. He hates that. Anyway, what I want to do now is I want to give a couple testimonies. So since I've been humbling myself and been following the Bible, God has been blessing me, with certain opportunities and things that shouldn't work out, but they work out in my favor. And it's hard to describe, but I remember this one time, I said this in our video, but I went and I bought a bike. So it wasn't just like I bought a bike and talked to some guy, on Facebook Marketplace all day long. It was, I was driving around with one of the guys I live with. Two of us have been driving around through the state of Florida, and I asked this guy, because I was doing the driving, I was like, hey, can you look and see if you can find me a bike? And he's like, yeah. So he's looking on Facebook Marketplace as we're driving, and we've been driving through various parts of Florida because we were buying a bunch of stuff off Facebook Marketplace. And so he's looking around, trying to find stuff while I'm driving. And he finds a bike, shows it to me, and I'm like, oh, that looks pretty cool. Pretty nice bike, I was like, some truck, commuter bike, and I liked it. So he's messaging this guy for me, and I see the price on it, and it's, it's like $250, and the bike is immaculate. So anyway, I go and he's messaging this guy that owns the bike. Long story short, and the guy that owns the bike was replying. The only problem is, like, this guy wasn't really in town, and we were looking at this bike and messaging the owner, and we're like, hey, can we pick it up today? And the guy that owned the bike was like, well, I'm not around, And he's like, I'll talk to my roommate, and I'll tell him to sell it, Long story short, his roommate finally calls us, and he's like, I don't know anything about the bike. It's like, oh, I don't know. Didn't the guy just tell you, all about it? And so, like, he's like, I gotta call this other guy that owns the bike. That's what this roommate tells us. And he's like, I'll call you back in a few minutes. So the guy I'm with, the two of us have been driving for about 8 hours straight, and we're kind of like, we're stopped in this one city. We're in, like, Pensacola, Florida, which is still about an hour and a half away from where we live. And so we had a pretty long day, the two of us already. And So we stopped, and this roommate was like, I'll call you back in 5 minutes, and 5 minutes became 10. You know, 10 minutes became 15. So this guy I'm with, the two of us, um, we 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 end up praying over it. Like, should we go get this bike? Because it was another half hour out of our way, opposite way of our house, and so we pray over it, and we get an answer like, yeah, we should go ahead that way. So it had been 15 minutes. This guy was going to call us, and like in 5 after he heard from his roommate, and he mentioned the first time he called us like he was in a hurry to go somewhere. So this guy I'm with, that's why we're kind of hesitant. Do we want to head that way? Because this guy didn't seem like he was going to stick around or not, or didn't seem like he was going to stick around. So long story short, after we prayed on it, we ended up started heading that way. And I think we were driving for about another 15 minutes or 10 minutes and something like that. And all of a sudden, this roommate finally calls us. He's like, yeah, he's asking where we are. And like, he seems like really anxious to go somewhere, like, and we tell him we're about like 15 minutes away ish, because we had already started heading that way. And the guy's like, well, cool, I can wait for that. So we end up getting there, and we show up, and the guy's outside. He's got the bike sitting out, and test ride it. The thing's immaculate. I literally just hand the guy cash. I'm just like, thank you, sorry to let you go. Now I ride the bike all the time. It's a great bike, and it's just an example of God blessing me. Like, gave me a sign like I should go get it. About it to show up in this search, and everything worked out with it. It's signs that a lot of people miss. Like, God is like, hey, do this, hey, do that, hey, do this. And in that case, it worked out very well for me. And like I said, it's something I use quite a bit. It's not something I paid an arm and a leg for. And, it was a great purchase, if you will. I also have like another testimony, about God. So I can't remember the exact year. It was like around 2011, 2012. I got into a car accident, and I racked my head pretty good, and I suffered like an internal slight brain trauma, like nothing that left me permanently damaged or anything. But I ended up developing this condition called hyperprolactemia. So what happened is, in this accident, my pituitary gland, something got pressed against it, if you will, and my pituitary gland was basically not making enough testosterone because part of it was being occluded, and their part was being told to make all kinds of prolactin, which is like a female hormone that men make. And anyway, so I was basically in my early 40s, and I was almost like an old man. So some things that low testosterone does to men is it makes you forgetful, makes you have a lack of energy, and something in the bedroom. But anyway, so I had that going on, and I didn't even realize it. Asked me, if I would have remembered certain things. No, I didn't. But I wasn't having any energy. I was tired and fatigued, napping all the time. And so I went and I was seeing a doctor, and this doctor gave me like a pill. This is after I saw like my general family doctor. And to give you an idea how bad my testosterone levels were, getting I don't know what they measure the results in, but a count of 200 is considered low. I took 2 tests, and like the first test, like my general practitioner ran on me, was so low, he wanted to verify it, and he made me run a second test because he didn't believe the results. And I took so my 2 tests didn't even add up to a low score. And my second test was almost double the first one. So anyway, he referred me to some like specialist, and the specialist gave me like a pill to take, and then so I was taking this pill. It kind of helped, and all of a sudden I'm just like, I'm done with this. This isn't doing anything, And I put my faith in God, and yeah, I actually got healed. Like I went back from being, you know, testosterone tests that were just over 200 to like a few years later, like after being off this medication for quite a while. I mean, the best the medication could do was get me up around 250, which is still, fairly low, but not low. But I took some tests a few years after the fact, after I was off this medication for years, and my tests were up over 400, which is, pretty decent, I would say. So, I mean, God's blessed my health since I've been obedient and following His laws and, humbling myself. And, yeah, it's a testament that, that He's real, and He does things. Like I say, most people miss Him because they don't, pay any attention to Him. Or they don't even notice, and they just say, well, that was a freak accident. Oh, no, it was God moving things to, for you to learn or for you to experience or for you to be blessed, and you just wrote it as some freak luck or something. And, yeah, a lot of times that's not the case. But next I want to read, I want to kind of talk about how to be humble. So I'm going to read Isaiah 58, 3 through 10. And this is how to do a biblical fast. Like a fast, and it's about humility. It's about humbling your spirit. Okay. So this is Isaiah 58, verses 3 through 10. Wherefore have ye fasted, say they, and thou seest not? Wherefore have we afflicted our soul, and thou takest no knowledge? Behold, in the day of your fast ye find pleasure, and exact all your labors. Behold, you fast for strife and debate, and to smite with the fist of wickedness. Ye shall not fast as ye do this day, to make your voice to be heard on high. Is it such a fast that I have chosen, a day for man to afflict his soul? Is it to bow down his head as a bulrush, and to spread his sackcloth and ashes under him? Wilt thou call this a fast, an acceptable day to the Lord? Is not this the fast that I have chosen? To loose the bonds of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, and to let the oppressed go free, and that you break every yoke? Is it not to deal thy bread to the hungry, and that thou bring the poor that are cast out to thy house? When thou seest the naked, that thou cover him, and that thou hide not thyself from thine own flesh? Then shall thy light break forth as the morning, and thine health shall spring forth speedily, and thy righteousness shall go before thee. The glory of the Lord shall be thy reward. Then shalt thou call, and the Lord shall answer. Thou shalt cry, and He shall say, Here I am. If thou take away from the midst of the yoke, the putting forth of the finger, and speaking vanity. And if you draw out thy soul to the hungry, and satisfy the afflicted soul, then shall thy light rise in obscurity, and thy darkness be as the noonday. So for those who don't understand what this fast is about, it's about helping the poor, especially those that don't have food. And the easy way to do this fast is you eat nothing but bread and drink nothing but water when you do this fast. And you take the money you would have saved and you go help the poor. And then you don't sin on this particular day. So you are basically helping the poor. And what you're doing by doing that is you're lowering your spirit, you're humbling yourself, you're lowering yourself and elevating them. That's why it's such a great fast. It's about helping those in need. And everyone wins in the situation. The poor get what they need. You get rewarded by God. You get your spirit humbled, in the process. And I remember the first few times I ever did this, I felt awkward, and I went to a homeless encampment and was trying to help people there, and yeah, I felt like I was out of place and didn't belong there. And then I started doing it more and more and more, and people would recognize me. People would come up and talk to me, and people would be like, yeah, they'd share their stories and things, how things were going during the day, what they did, and it was interesting. Some of these people had some pretty interesting backgrounds. But yeah, off on a tangent, that's how you truly afflict your soul. And even if you're poor, you can still help those who are less fortunate than you are. It's not a big, huge sacrifice. I think, if you're poor, you can probably afford some bread. And, like I said, the money you save, you just give to them, give to somebody else that has less than you do. And the next part about how to humble yourself is you have to be obedient. Obedience to God means you have to read the Word for yourself. You have to read and not just be a reader. You have to be a reader and a doer. You have to follow it. Some things like a lot of people don't think they have to do. They have to follow the laws of Moses. You have to help others, like I mentioned before. And you have to pray without ceasing. Anyway, this is going to be a fairly short video. I hope it finds the right person and blesses somebody. So, thanks for watching. All power and praise to the Most High. Amen.